here during this time. I know Sylvia's family was here. Our moderator, Silly for Him, which means Silly for Christ, right? Sylvia, Silly, has 7 ancestors who served in the American Revolution. So big shout out to all of our moderators, especially Sylvia, and to the patriotic service of their family members, right? So strong parliament, a weak king, negotiating with the colonial leaders, and the 7 Years' War had just happened. The 7 Years' War occurred between England and France. And this is significant because England now had a massive war debt to the tune of 146 million pounds. 146 million pounds in debt from the war against France. And so England's biggest budget to that point had only been 8 million pounds. Now they've got a 146 million pound war debt. You know what I mean? They got this new colony to deal with, which is expensive, okay? And so they needed to make some money. The interest alone, the interest on the war debt was 8 million, or it was 5 million pounds. England's biggest budget to that point was 5 million. The total war debt was 146 million pounds. So England had to make some of that money back. They figured the easiest way to make that money back was to tax their new colony, right? So they taxed us, the colonists here, in what has become the United States. And the taxes that they decided to pass were the Navigation Acts. Those were the first taxes. So Sylvia, as we're going here, please put extra color in the chat. I know we're going to look up towards Parker's Revenge, and we'll talk about your ancestor who led that engagement for the second engagement against the British, technically. We're going to talk about Parker's Revenge and Sylvia's ancestor. But as I'm working my way up through it, sweating in front of these service members here at the National Harbor, as I'm sweating out here for y'all, I want to get the message across, okay? I want you to hear it, and I want you to see it here in a beautiful patriotic area. So more to come. The problem with the Navigation Acts is related to the notion of salutary neglect. And salutary neglect is essentially when one group just blindly looks to the side and lets another group do something that they sort of need to do to get by. In this instance, Professor Stoller says that was smuggling. He said the colonies couldn't really get by if they're getting taxed on everything that comes into the colonies. You know what I mean? They're gonna go broke. They're not gonna be able to pay for it. So smuggling was just a way of life. Now with the Navigation Acts, the English have said, no more smuggling. We're taxing all the goods coming from England. And not only that, but we're gonna send the Navy to blockade your harbors. And whenever you try to bring a boat in, we're gonna pull you over and we're gonna search you to look for something to tax. Let me ask you this, patriots, and put it in the chat if you can figure it out while I'm asking. Put it in the chat for me. Which amendment now to the Constitution of the United States of America protects against illegal search and seizure? Illegal search and seizure. Can anybody put in the chat which amendment that is? So at the time, that amendment didn't exist, Constitution didn't exist. England is taxing every good that's coming into the United States with the Navigation Act. Not only that, the Navy is raiding ships, just raiding ships to find things to tax. And if someone tried to bring something in without declaring it, they would be tried in an admiralty court. They didn't have the Sixth Amendment right to a speedy trial by a jury of their peers. So I see some little chats popping up. I hope you figured it out by now. The Fourth Amendment protects us against illegal search and seizure here in the United States today, right? Unless you're in Washington, D.C. with a turbo diesel truck, as you've seen on other live channels, right? All right, here we go. Well, I got my hair cut for this hot day out here working for y'all in the sun, working for the Patriots. I hope you appreciate this. All right. The concept of salutary neglect, it was allowing smuggling. Now the smuggling is off. Now there are military trials. Fourth Amendment and Sixth Amendment weren't around, so the colonists were getting screwed pretty hard on this, and they couldn't even, you know, just get by, basically get by. Then the Stamp Act comes down from England, and the Stamp Act taxes all public documents like books and newspapers, right? So all public documents are taxed, and that also allows the government of England to read every document that they're taxing. They get, oh, you want to publish this? Let me see it. Okay, now I know who you are and what you're saying. Pay me a tax. All right, there you go. Now you can tell your buddies. So that was a Stamp Act, and this really pissed off the colonists. A lot of people don't know what I'm about to tell you. The Stamp Act was what induced the colonists to come together for the first time and act as one cohesive unit. It wasn't the First Continental Congress. It was the Stamp Act Congress. And the Stamp Act Congress came to be when colonists were like fighting each other and banishing people for having a different perspective. You know, if you think about it, how did Rhode Island get started as a colony? Can anybody tell me the name of the guy who got kicked out of Massachusetts for having differing political views? Does anyone remember? What's his name, Patriots? Put it in the chat if you know. I'll say it in a couple of minutes. I'm sorry I can't see the chat right now. I will go in the shade once we finish this part of the history lesson and before we interview random citizens about what they think, okay? So the Stamp Act is taxing all public documents. It's the first time the colonists come together. Roger Williams was banished from Massachusetts for having a differing political view. And once he was banished from Massachusetts, he went and started Rhode Island. And so instead of banishing each other, now they're coming together and they're saying, we've got to figure something out. This is crazy. After the Stamp Act, the Townshend Act happens. And you can remember it by thinking Townshend. So the towns send the goods from England. Any English good is now taxed at a higher rate. 1767. This is in 1767. The Townshend Act taxed all incoming British goods. And tell me what you think happened right now. Put it in the chat. There's already been the Navigation Act where they're getting pulled over and searched without any rights. They don't have a jury trial anymore. Now all their public documents are being taxed. They can't even speak to each other. They're starting to get a little bit frustrated. What do you think Americans did when the English did this to the colonists here in America? One guess. What do you think they did? They started killing people. That's right, massive violence. So not only was there massive violence where colonists were killing English soldiers, but there was massive violence between the colonies, which created the first civil wars in America. They were fought in the 1760s after the Stamp Act, when colonists were trying to figure out, the Stamp Act Congress, you know, what are we going to do about this? What are we going to do about this oppression, okay? The Townshend Act is in 1767. It's taxing all incoming goods. Those are the first civil wars in the United States of America. Hydration break.